Hi everybody, welcome to webinar number 11, special one today with a special guest. Little starter for you here, but before I start actually let me remind you, if you've got general chat, put it in the group chat. If you've got specific questions, then if you put them in the Q&A box, somebody from Pearson's will get back to you as soon as possible. So hi everybody, it's really nice. I'm sure we've got some new people here today, so welcome. Little starter activity here. I went through the Amazon top reviews because I used hotel reviews last time, but there's some absolutely fantastic ones, and I'm sure you've seen them before perhaps, but this one was about the thick medium ballpoint pens for her. Okay, it isn't, it's a set of pink pens, but it's a sort of a spoof review, and it's really interesting just for looking at spotting satire, irony, parody, humour, that kind of thing. It's really amusing. So this is what I did with it in the classroom this week. So I've done these things before where I've done the grid idea and they choose which task they want to do. And I've found actually remotely that that's really helpful. It's giving students some sort of ownership and it makes them feel less overwhelmed as well. So improve it, find and add the missing apostrophe, rewrite it, perhaps using dashes rather than brackets or by using a greater variety of sentence styles. Rewrite it, be a feminist. What do you think of the pink glittery pens? I quite like them actually. Follow it. Write a review for Bic for him, medium ballpoint pens. And what colour would they be? Give thanks for it. Imagine you are the supplier. How would you thank the reviewer? And I put an extra F in there, so how would you correct my mistake there? How would you thank the reviewer for their praise? Okay. But I really like this actually because it's really topical in terms of tying into the whole sort of gender debates that are going on now. So it's an interesting one to use, and my students got a lot out of it actually, and they wrote some fantastic reviews that I'm hoping to get in next week. Okay, thank you. Let's move on. Oops, gone too fast as usual. Let me get my clicker right. So we've got a special guest star today, Chris Curtis, who asked me to say that he's magnificent. I asked him actually to choose an adjective and he didn't choose any. He just wanted to be Chris Curtis, but he is magnificent. He is the author of this book, How to Teach English. So he'll be with us shortly, so really pleased to have him with us today. If you haven't been with us before, this is how it works. We're just going to have a little check-in in a moment where we ask you a question and it's a chance for some discussion and I'll feedback what people are saying. Then I'll a little bit of feedback on what's gone before and areas that I'm going to cover in future. Then I go through some online resources, what I've seen in these last couple of weeks that were good online. Then you'll get Chris Curtis and he's going to be about 25 minutes talking to you about reading. Then we get a breakout time where you'll be in a smaller group than the big large group, and it'll be your time to discuss, share and energize. Okay, so then at the end we'll talk through shared resources. So in terms of feedback, interesting. I've just literally copied and pasted these from the feedback. I just want you to know that we do take your feedback very seriously and I do work on it every week. Revamping English language for post-16. I'm hoping to be able to give you some news about that in a couple of weeks, that we might be able to offer something there. So I'll park that for a moment. How to offer the students meaningful feedback that they will apply to their work. That's been a really tricky one for me. A lot of people ask for that remotely. That's been a real tricky one for me actually, in terms of remotely, because I haven't wanted to be particularly sharp and critical. So I'm not sure that I've got the answer to that, but if anybody has, I'd be grateful to hear about it. Non-fiction writing, totally covering that today. Chris is going to cover that for you. Structuring fiction writing, I'm going to do something on that in the last language session of this this academic year. And more of the same. So great, you certainly get more of the same. Can anybody help? The Empress, that's one of our new texts under diversity, the new diversity text we've put in place. And I know a couple of schools are already wanting to teach it. I can tell you that a knowledge organizer is already on our system for it to help you with the basics there. And a full PowerPoint recorded lesson, how to get a student through an exam, is coming, and that will probably be available in the next couple of weeks. So that's a starting point. Some people are saying they can't hear me. I hope you can. Some people are saying they can't hear me. Can somebody confirm that they can? Oh, good. Sound is good here. Okay, it's not everybody. Sorry about that. If you have got a specific problem, pop it into the Q&A rather than into the group chat. That would be really helpful, and then somebody will get back to you. Okay, so that was what people needed help with. Coming soon, a focus on teaching structure for language would be useful, and I am going to cover that in the last language session I do. So hopefully there's the feedback. And Sarah says, I've asked students to complete self-reflection questions each week. Now that's interesting. What was easy, challenging, and what will you do to improve? One question, the work, yeah, and how would you rag your work this week? Opens up feedback. Yeah, I think you're right, yes, and I'm responding to their answers. Yeah, I think it can become a little bit more of a dialogue, can't it, when you're doing remote work, so that's good. Now we're going to do a little check-in. So I was back last week with Year 10. We talked last week, if you were in my webinar last week, about what had gone well and what hadn't. I just wanted to know what are you offering them. So what is everybody doing? Chris and I talked about this earlier, what we were offering. What's the mood and attitude been like? Because I'm not teaching my own students. I've got 2 bubbles of 10 and they're not students I see on a regular basis and I don't know them. So it's been very difficult with just 4 weeks to establish rapport. So if we could have those check-in boxes, please, and you'll have an opportunity to type in there some responses. So please go for it. There's a lot of you. We've got a couple of hundred here, so let's see how much we can get. Multiple attendees are typing, so you're all at it. Oh, Gemma says positive. A little quiet. Laura Barker's doing prep for speaking and listening. Read through of Inspector calls. Live lessons from home. Spoken language endorsement. Oh, lots. Oh, we're all doing a very good variety of things. I thought prep for speaking and listening would be a really good idea. And opportunity to ask questions, I think that's a good idea. Noughts and crosses online. Poetry. I thought more would be doing poetry, actually. We're doing poetry, so that's interesting. Full day of English. That's an interesting way of covering it. Oh, and people are really enjoying the smaller groups. Jenny says mixed, a bit bewildered and baffled. Yeah, I got the feeling that my students hadn't yet learned the sort of etiquette for this kind of lesson, which was interesting. Working in bubbles of 10, not own students, a little strange. Just take a couple more there. So if you're typing already, type away. Otherwise, we'll leave it at that point. Very quiet and a little odd. I'm exactly with you on that, Rebecca. I'm really kind of all singing, all dancing, and I'm sat there with some terribly well-behaved students with their pen ready to copy down what I say. So I'm jealous of those who are getting a lot of engagement. Okay. Shell-shocked at being back in school. I think that's right. Yeah, I think that probably sums up my students. Okay, thank you. If we could go back to the slides then, that's lovely. And yes, I agree, Scott. It's absolutely great to be back. It is what we all went into it for, after all, isn't it? Okay, that was great. Thank you very much. We've got some interesting ideas there. So what have I seen online this week? A couple of things. One thing caught my eye. I'm sure a lot of you have seen this. This was the awkward lessons of my luxury lockdown in Kensington. I think it was originally in the Financial Times, and then I know it went viral, as they say, and it was definitely in the Times. There was a response to it. I must admit, I read it and I thought it was satire from the very beginning. But if you have a read of it, and if you just Google that title, then you'll find that she's actually saying that obviously one of her major problems was how to get the Ocado delivery and how to get her nanny to live in. So it's just interesting. It'll be interesting to use that in the classroom and see what students think and get them to actually engage. If you see what Chris is going to tell you about later on, I think this will be a good article actually to help them with just getting what's the idea before they actually start analysing the language in detail. So that was an interesting one. This is something I tried that I've seen a couple of times on Twitter, and I used it for unseen poetry, and it worked a treat this week. I used some of Roald Dahl's Revolting Rhymes just to get students back in the swing of it, really, because I didn't want to dump them with an anthology poem straight away. But they came up with some really good ideas actually, and it made them more confident about approaching the actual poems themselves. And it was less threatening than starting with an analytical phrase or having to use an analytical verb. It was just a kind of intro to it, so it was a good way of doing it. Another thing I saw, and I did ask, this is a lovely lady called Sarah Barker who has a blog called Round Learning, who is absolutely brilliant. And she has written about using the idea of the impact of writers rather than the effect of the words, which actually turns it on its head a bit and is quite interesting and effective. if you follow that link, she's got a whole lesson demonstrating this online on her blog, which is really interesting. But this just struck me as a really good way of modelling, is having the phrases actually ready to stick in, and the fact that she's crossed out. So I really like that as a kind of live model of showing how it goes wrong and how to correct it. I really like that. And then the final one, just a reminder, I'm sure you've all heard of Jennifer Webb. This is her the link to her booking, and she's got some great events coming up, and they're all for charity. All go to a local Leeds charity, which is at the moment doing food parcels, etc. So Touchstone Loves Food is the charity there, and they're only about a £5 or £6, and they're brilliant. So I would advise you to get on one of those, because she's fantastic, and you get the recording of it afterwards, and all of her resources are free, and it's marvellous. So have a look at that. Okay, we're now getting to the time. I hope Chris is with us and he's ready to join us, because I am going to pass over to him now. So Chris, yes, and he is. I'm going to turn my webcam off, I hope, or stop it. No, I'm going to turn it off, I think. And Chris, welcome. It's really lovely to see you.
Hello.
Can we check we can hear you? Brilliant. I'll leave everything in your capable hands then for up to 30 minutes. Lovely. See you later.
Thank you. Thank you ever so much. Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining me in this lovely, hot, sunny day and stuck inside with a laptop at the moment. I'm Chris Curtis. Some of you may know me as XRS32. I'm head of English. I'm working pretty full-time at the moment, like most of us, working remotely. And so I've taken a little bit of a break to chat with you today to look at reading, and in particular helping students with their reading in exam conditions. So I'm going to look at some approaches and some ways in which we can help the majority of our students with their reading in the classroom. Now, from some of us may be AQA, EdExcel, a number of different exam boards here. I'm going to look at some strategies that are going to work across exam boards, and it should be helping you in whichever exam board you are. So I'm not being very, very specific today. If I move on, so one of the things I do is in a mock exam, I will spend time watching students and how they work. And I think it's a fantastic thing to do as a teacher and a head of department, if you've got that opportunity, to sit and watch and see how they work, because you actually understand the thought processes that are going on inside the student's mind when you see them working under exam conditions in a particular mock exam hall. So we tend to get a number of different types of students with their reading, and I've kind of categorized them for you. So you tend to get the group of students that highlight every single technique, and you can kind of see that the problem is for them, reading in English is all about the techniques. They've got to search, and often when they're writing, the first thing they'll talk about is the techniques, and it kind of is, it's not very productive when we get to the more depth explanation. Then you get the highlight ticklers, and they just colour in the whole thing, and they have a different shade and move about different shades and different colours, but they just tickle it, and there's no real engagement in there. Then you have the students that rush to the question, and so what they do is they just look at the text quickly, and then they go straight to the question, and then they start answering it. And what they tend to do is often they don't read the text, they look at the question, and then they read the text. And what they're doing is they're reading with the focus of answering that question. We explore why that's quite a problem when it comes to our students in particular. Then you've got the students that struggle, and they stare at the page, and they're not quite sure what to do. And then you've got a small population of students that are silent readers and just leave blank copies, but they leave, they can write good answers. So looking at how students work in the exam environment is really, really interesting from my point of view, because we can kind of see what the processes that are going on and actually try and stop some of the problems that are happening. Now, when I'm talking about text, I'm talking about fiction or non-fiction text today. So some of the other things I'm relating to is to non-fiction, but I am talking about fiction as well. I'm talking about how do students deal with unseen text in an exam. So if I move on, the problem that we've got with a lot of text and the way that students work with text a lot of the time, and it's a bit like how we use television nowadays, is it's quite disposable. It's ephemeral. So we can watch a box set quickly and we gobble it up very, very quickly. The same with magazines and newspapers. It's very ephemeral, it's of the moment, and it's quick and it's fast. The problem is that the readers we want in the classroom and we want in the exam we don't want them to read like that. We want them to be very close, analytical readers. We don't want them to be quick, enjoying it, quick, fast paced. And the problem that happens with a lot of the way that we have things nowadays is we build up armchair experts. And one of the things I think for a lot of our students is false confidence. Students have this false confidence that they can read a text quickly and be able to answer a question to a high level. And so this is the problem that we have to challenge and we have to work. And a lot of that's based on their quick reading. They'll read a text very, very quickly and develop that fast confidence. And we see that nowadays on Twitter, don't we, when we see somebody who's telling teachers how to teach because they've read an article in a newspaper. So it's that level of engagement that we need to look at and work with students. So when we look at text, now I really think the subtext and talking to students about the subtext is really, really important. Now we tend to use the subtext for fiction. So we can say what's really, really going on here. And students get that, they understand that, but they don't always approach a non-fiction text in the same way. So it says that a man is waiting for his wife. What it could really mean is its relationship is strong. What might it really, really mean? And it could be about how this man has loved this woman and he's loved no other. And we can develop that layers of meaning. Now, with fiction, that's quite easy because we can step up and we can say symbolism. And what does it really, really mean? What does it symbolize? So we can build that up. But we don't refer to the subtext of non-fiction. And I think that for us is a real problem because we're expecting students to make big jumps, but we're not actually interrogating the text on a level of looking at implied meaning. That's where the danger comes for a lot of students. So let's take a text. So I'm going to give you just a brief minute just to have a look at this text here. And I'm going to kind of explain to you what a key problem that we have with a lot of students with their reading. So if you can just read that for me. Okay, I'd like to thank Matt Lynch, this is one of his paper 2 booklets, exam booklets that he used. I've just taken this from there. Now, one of the problems that we have with an unseen text is actually the level of engagement with it. Now, we all experience this difficulty with reading, and you know that with a book. You pick up a book and it takes you a very, very long time to kind of, well, a couple of pages usually for me, to get into that book. And I'd say that is a problem for a lot of our students because what they're doing is they're kind of really, really struggling with orienteering where they are, positioning their place in terms of the text. And so, for example, this extract we've got here, would they pick up that this is about a French woman visiting England, and she had some ideas of what she thought England would be like, but then she arrives and it's not what she expected it to be. And it's very, very different to the way there. So we really need to help students. Now, the problem is with those students who are looking at the exam question, they're not going to spend that time orienteering where they are in relation to the text. So we need to help students and we need to help them to build this positioning of where they are. And so they understand the text in particular of where they are. And this is where a lot of students fall down because what they're trying to do is they're trying to get to the end game, but they're not positioning themselves and looking where they are in relation to the text and who is it about and what's going on. So that's a bit of the text we're going to look at. So the first thing we've got to help them do is orienteer, place themselves. What's going on? Where is it on? Where is it going? And a very, very simple way we can do that is who, what, where, when, and very much simple from that angle there. The next thing I think we need to do to help the students is looking at the impact. Now, I've changed the way that I look at the effect of text because I think a lot of the time what we're doing is we were jumping too far ahead. And very, very simply now, I say positive or negative. And then I build onto the meta language to describe the effect. So, for example, this text in front of you here, is it positive or negative? That what would be my first idea with that, with the students then. So is it positive or is it negative? And for most of you can tell it's quite negative. We'll just give you a minute just to quickly read that extract there. And then once we've got that impact, And we can then say, positive or negative. Well, it's negative because. Now, half the problem our students are doing is they're rushing to look at the question and they're not doing that natural thinking behind it. And so if a student can say, well, this is negative because it mentions hell and it's describing things and it's horrible and it's nasty and it doesn't make England seem nice, we're then building that up. And so they're able to build up those kind of components into explanations. So when we get the question, they've already got that. Now, one of the things I would do is on a text, an unseen text, is get them to actually just put plus or minus, plus or minus. And then you can actually see where the text is got, because then they're able to see the structure of the text. They can see if it gets worse. They can see if it gets positive. They can see if it's positive and negative. So they're able to see that. And they're building up that picture about the subtext. Is this person happy? Are they happy about England? Now, straight away, we can get the idea that they're not happy about England. Once we've got that orienteering and once we've got that positive and negative effect in there. And then when we look at a bit further, then we can start giving them the language. And this is where I think we jump a bit, because we start looking at the effect and go, can we find an example where they're horrified? And often what I do now in lessons is I'll take an extract, I'll take a small little word in that, and I'll say positive or negative, positive or negative. And it's that quick, thought process that we're building into. And then you look at that word. And I think a lot of the time, what we're trying to do with students is we're trying to get them to kind of really kind of use sophisticated language to talk about the effect. And actually I think we need that cognitive process, positive or negative, and then you can attach it. So once you've got the negative vibe, that this is a negative text, then you can start saying, well, right, is it about fear? Is it that? Well, no, it's not quite fear, is it? It's disgust, isn't it? And then we can say, well, how can we say it's to do with disgust? What are the clues that's telling me that it is disgust that this person is trying to get across to us? And again, we can then go back to the subtext, and go, what's going on here? She doesn't like London. Why doesn't she like London? Well, it could be the fact that she's from France and she was thinking that England would be lovely, and she comes to England and it's Industrial Revolution, smog and horrible and that, and so she's shocked. And maybe so there's level in there. And maybe there is a sense of xenophobia. Maybe she's not quite happy with England. We could make connections. Is that under the text? But then we're building up that subtext and we're helping students with that. Now I'm going to take you quickly through another bit, because I think non-fiction is akin to poetry. It's quite a bit of a wild statement, but I think we kind of do non-fiction a disservice. And we come up with loads of extracts, and we go, look at this is a brilliant extract, oh, great, I love it, ooh. But the problem is that we don't look at non-fiction in the way that we do about poetry. Poetry is about ideas and feelings, expressing feelings, and it usually is one idea, a complex idea. That's what non-fiction is. And if you have a look at the meta-language that we use to talk about non-fiction, we tend to, and this is old specs as well, we're limited to genre, audience, purpose, and then something about the language. And one of the problems that I tend to have is, when I'm reading something, I'm not suddenly going, ooh, this is a horror story. I'm not suddenly going, ooh, this is a diary. It's probably a thought process that's right at the back of my mind, but really I'm engaging with the ideas. And I'm going, oh, yeah, I agree with this, or no, I don't agree with this. I think this is a bit of a problem, or, we're engaging. And that's what poetry does. It's an engagement. And I think you can see where actually we do non-fiction a disservice. So what I suggest is actually there's a meta-language for talking about non-fiction already. And I think that meta-language is exactly the language that we use to describe fiction. We don't have to give them new tools. Okay, the tools are already there. So if we have a look at that text that we were looking at, that we decided that it was negative, we decided that we were horrified by it, then we start bringing these things in here and looking about them. So can we mention anything about setting? Can we mention anything about characters? Well, actually, there's a voice here, isn't there, of the person. There is a setting. We're seeing London. Are there themes? Well, yes, there are themes, because there's themes to do with mythology. the Cyclops, we've got hell, we've got religious imagery. So we can see how actually those things are there. And that's why I think we have to look at the way that we deal with unseen texts. That actually by looking at a piece of prose and looking at a piece of non-fiction, there are common elements. And I think a lot of the time, students think that when they're looking at non-fiction, they are looking at something completely different. And it's almost like we've got to have a different pair of glasses for reading poetry, for reading non-fiction, for reading fiction. And actually, no, all of them are dealing with expressing complex ideas and sharing feelings. They have different elements to it. And, when we look at this text, we can look at the message, can't we? And then we can talk about the structure. And all those things, if we can get that cross-understanding in students' heads between, look, these sorts of things you're talking about non-fiction, you can talk about fiction as well. And the same with poetry as well. They are connected, and it's not a separate discipline. Because I think you sometimes get with exam papers, certainly with non-fiction, that students tend to just go, it's non-fiction. I don't know what to write about. And actually, we need to help build them up. And that's where I think that 15 minutes before they even look at the question, they need to get these sorts of things clear in their head. Positive, negative. What's the subtext? What's the agenda? And then looking at, are there any characters? Are there people here? I mean, do we look at non-fiction texts and look about the people? We don't, do we? Do we look at the setting? No, because what we tend to do is we go facts and opinion. And when you look at a lot of the exam papers for non-fiction, they tend to just look at the writer and the reader, and the writer's ideas, and the writer's thinking and their feeling. Now, I'm going to move on quickly. So I think these are things that we've got to look at with students. And certainly in that those 15 minutes that we have for looking at unseen text. And we've got to help them. And I always say to students, don't look at the exam question. Don't look at the exam question. Make sure you know that text very, very well. Make sure that you know. So the key thing is orienteering. Where are we in position? What's going on? Where am I? What, who, when, where? Then the subtext. Okay, it says this, but what is it really about? Okay, is it challenging racism? Is it, comparing, French weather to English weather? Is this a battle between France and Britain? Is this within a text? Or is it, and then we can build it into positive or negative, and then building it up. And then only then are we at a point when we can look at the choices. So those technique spotters, they're missing all this important level of understanding when it comes to reading a text. Now, to take it a bit further, you might think, well, you're doing a disservice, Chris, to non-fiction. All right, so you're doing a disservice. Well, then, as soon as we've got that meta language for looking at text, from looking at plot, setting, and themes, which kids already know, because from year 7 and before, we've been drilling it into them to look for the characters, look at the setting. They've already got that stuff there. It's just a piece of non-fiction. That's the only difference that's there. Then we can start looking at building and those higher level skills, okay, separating thoughts and feelings. So this person thinks this and they feel this. And then we can look at ideas of fears, dreams and worries. Okay, well, if you have a look at the extract that we've been using, well, the fear for this woman's fear is the Industrial Revolution, and you can see it's about coal. And when you look at the further extract, she thinks London has become a place of death. And in a way, you can see her fear and her worries about the Industrial Revolution. There's some sophisticated, I'm getting tripping over my words now, sophisticated level of thinking. But actually, that can be easily segmented and built up with. Then we've got the line of argument, perspective, agenda, context, and looking at, is this person, are they giving us evidence from what they've seen? Or is it their experience, which we know experience can be flawed? Or is it knowledge? So you can see that we can start building those things in there. Now, please don't come up with an acronym of just adding all those things there. But I'm kind of showing you that, look, we've already got the meta language to talk about non-fiction. We've already got an approach to talk about non-fiction. These are the things then that I think we can do with students. And like, for example, that small little extract, I would say, that we can look at this Okay, we can look at this text and say, right, what is this person's perspective from that tiny little bit? Okay, what's her agenda? That's an interesting question to ask with non-fiction. Okay, they're saying this, but what's their agenda? We notice that with the world at the moment. Everybody's got an agenda, haven't they, in public? So, what is their agenda when looking at it? So those are things that we can then get the more sophisticated readers to look at, and we can build into our teaching. And then, we can look at them to dovetail. The other thing I'd also flag up is I think non-fiction is better with short little extracts. Yes, at the end, we're looking at a longer text, but I think there's nothing wrong in us spending, a lesson looking at a paragraph and interrogating it in this way. The problem that we've got with a lot of students is they get the big text in front of them, and it's very, very hard for them to actually block off text. And so that's why I think for us, looking at just a paragraph, then later on look at the rest of the text, that's helpful, and then have that small one to be that close analysis. Because it's like poetry. A paragraph is like a poem. You can do it that way, and it's more accessible, in a way, I'd say more enjoyable, because then you can go, oh, let's have a look at the rest of the text. So that, in a way, is where I'd come into it. And then we could then put these next to it and then see it that way. So my key points with helping students with looking at unseen text, whether it's fiction, non-fiction, is to articulate that concept of subtext. What is the subtext? And make them understand that there is a literal meaning and there's another layer of meaning and different layers of meaning. And actually being very, very specific with non-fiction and saying what is the subtext. Now, the danger is that when we get students writing about it, they say the subtext of this is, that we can deal with as teachers. But I think we have to articulate that non-fiction has a subtext, that there is implied meaning and there's something else underneath there. The orienteering stage, we need to help our weaker readers with that, to help them. And I think certainly using small paragraphs would help them. Simplify the impact, get them to think positive or negative, then build up to the meta language to describe the effect. Instead of trying to go for that, it's a foreboding atmosphere, it's ominous, let's go, it's negative, and then we can build it up. And let students go through that cognitive process of, here's where it is, and I'm going to have a look at my word bank associated with those words. Think about, what is the reader feeling? The student is the reader. So what they're feeling, positive or negative. Okay, and then finally, language analysis is the last thing. And I think we've got to train students to stop spotting all the techniques. Because when a lot of examiner reports are coming back and say, they're spotting loads of techniques, it's not the spotting that gets them the marks, it's the explanation. And we've got to help them to explain. So if they can say what the subtext is, if they can say what the impact is on them as a reader, whether it's positive or negative, then that will help them in the long run. So, bit of a whistle-stop tour. That's my book, and there's my blog. Feel free to message me on Twitter. I'm usually on Twitter most days, and I'm more willing to help out in any way. But if there's any questions that people have at the moment, I'm more willing to take some. I think you're on mute. So do I need to mute myself, Julie?
No, you can stay as you are, Chris.
No, you can stay as you are. I was mute. Sorry, I was mute. That was absolutely fantastic. It really plays into what I believe in, that we need to go back to reading, because that's really what we're testing. And if we can't read something, there's too much emphasis on dashing into the job in hand, rather than realising that we haven't actually taught them to read effectively. And so that really resonated with me. I thought it was absolutely fantastic. If anybody's got any questions, do please shout.
Yeah.
You might be lucky enough to get Chris in your room in a moment. People are saying, yeah, really good for low reading. Thank you so much. Yeah, obviously universally positive. And if we were live here, you'd have a round of applause now. So I'm sure people would be thanking you. I just wanted to ask, at what stage you would start introducing longer texts? Would you teach them those kind of skills and then move on to longer?
Well, I think it's up to you judging as a teacher. I think this is the thing, we like a quick, definitive sort of approach to it. I think with the text if the kids are rolling with it. For me, it would depend on the text itself. That. But the problem we've got with a lot of students is they've got that big block of text. And when they've got the big block of text, a lot of our students, what they can't do is they can't narrow it down. And so I think, there's certainly scope for us to say, here's the text, right, which is the paragraph that you think is the paragraph that you are going to work on. And I think really, that is the thing that we've got to build on. But I think there isn't a set time. I think, certainly Key Stage 3 should be about looking as much text as possible. And, sometimes looking at whole text. I think that variety, but also, certainly when we get to 10 and 11, that we should be mindful about, look, this is the stumbling block for students, that they cannot, a lot of them cannot condense the text or they cannot self-select. And that's the problem. They're not self-selecting the right part of the text. And so they're trying to talk about everything. That's why we get kids with answers to every single thing.
Yes. Somebody's asked, actually, I'll come to a question in a moment. But I think the other thing that's really interesting and powerful about this is that, particularly at the moment, while people are living in their bubbles, in their echo chambers, and there is another phrase for it that I won't use on here, but while they're in that bubble, then it's our duty as English teachers to teach them how to read past that and to actually look at text and challenge them. And I always say, look, the first thing you do when you pick up a non-fiction text is think, why has the guy picked up a pen? Why is this woman bothering to write? What does she want to make you feel? What's the point? And I think that it comes into, obviously you talked about it in much more sophisticated terms, in terms of agenda, but I think that's really important at the moment, and it is our job, I think, to do that. But exams have narrowed us away from that a little bit, perhaps. Hopefully now. Go on.
Yeah, I think it is about training. It is about training students, and I think it isn't an easy, quick fix. But the problem is that we're not training students enough in how they interrogate texts. And I think we've got to be very, very specific, certainly for our weaker readers. We've got to sort of say, and I love the fact that we're moving, through lots of cognitive science, but, showing them the process of reading and what is it like. And we're kind of, we turn reading into a mystical element. It's an art. You just sit there and you just do it. I think we need to be very, very explicit of taking through the cognitive process.
Yeah, I was just going to say, somebody said, what do you tell them to do when they get to a word they can't read? And I did a session on that a couple of weeks ago. I've always specialised in, I've spent my life on the CD borderline and specialised in poorly behaved or poorly motivated students at that level. And what I did in the end was I blanked out the words I thought they couldn't read in advance and proved to them that they could still read it without, just to give them confidence. And they used to it. So they literally would just ignore the word, because that's what we do. My husband read the whole of Harry Potter to my son, not knowing how to pronounce Hermione. He called her Hermione. It would have been better to it. So when they got to the pictures, Ben was devastated. He turned to his dad and said, Dad, they've got it wrong. He still believed in his dad at that point. He doesn't now. But I say to them, it's a Hermione thing. If you want to say Hermione in your mind, do. But if you don't understand the word, you're not going to analyse it anyway. So I just want, we haven't got time to do much more, but can you do a quick 1 minute on, somebody asked if they're a PGCE student, and I feel bad for them at the moment because they've missed out on some of their training. So could you advise a PGCE student what they should do between now and September to get ready for this reading idea?
Well, if they tweet me, I'll talk to them directly if they want, because I think, at the time, I'm more than willing to do that. I think, it's a very difficult situation for them. So if they want to tweet me, and I'll talk to them and I'll help them.
Excellent.
So I think, what I say in 1 minute would not be able to help directly, but I'll talk to them.
Okay, that's a really good, really kind offer. Thank you, Chris. Okay, well, thanks ever so much. Chris is going to stay with us now because we are going to move on to our tea break time. And if you haven't been with us before, what happens now is you'll go into a room. It's obviously a virtual room. You'll stay where you are unless you want to move rooms. And you'll get an opportunity to share ideas and to talk in a smaller group about what we've just had there. So here's your groups. You'll have a Pearson person with you, and we'll do about 5 minutes, okay? Chris will be in one group, and he will corral your ideas. And then, Chris, if you can come back and join us after the tea break and tell us what you found out. So, okay, we'll go to that now.
Hi.
Hi, everybody. That didn't go well, did it?
No, sorry about that.
I'm not sure what was happening. I mean,
I don't know what.
a couple of people said their rooms were swirling. I don't know whether they'd been on the gin and tonics or what was happening there. But anyway, no, I'm only joking.
Maybe it's the weather or something, but yeah, it didn't seem to work. Somebody said, yeah, I had a couple of people, but really the main chat was about feature spotting, that people hated it, and that this is going to get us back to what we went into teaching for, which is brilliant. And people are saying now on the group chat that they couldn't get a room to stay, it was static, they kept getting, it happened over the weekend to somebody else as well, so, anyway, I don't know if Chris wants to join us again, if he wants to turn his microphone on, and but it doesn't matter. What did you get, Pam?
So in my room, we didn't get a lot, like you said, there was an issue with rooms jumping about, but we had some really good points from Nick and a couple of other people. I can't remember who it was now because I was trying to type at the same time about the rooms. But they were saying about getting them to make blogs and then respond to each other's blogs. I thought that was a good idea for non-fiction. That was one of the things they were talking about, and then reading the tone in non-fiction, which was what you mentioned earlier. So yeah, along those lines really. But I like the idea of blogs. I think that's good.
Yeah, somebody's put there on the group chat that feature spotting is a safety net for learners, that if they feel insecure with their understanding of the text. I totally agree. I think I found once I stopped doing it that there was a whole kind of half term of fear from one year 10 class until they then moved over the other side, if you like, if they can. I don't know if that resonates with Chris at all. They were like, oh, I get it now. I see what I'm supposed to be doing. And then they were much better than they had been at the feature spotting stage because they actually were engaging and they enjoyed it more. So that was a thought.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I mean, the issue is, obviously, it's the easier thing. It's like alliteration. Alliteration is so easy to spot, but trying to explain it, and it's kind of, they need that backwards thought, and it's always hard for them to do it. If they start with the ideas first, then they can explain why the alliteration is being used. So, but yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Or not. Perhaps the alliteration was accidental.
Yeah,
I've had a lot of that. Okay, well, thank you. I think we're going to move on now because we didn't get much out of those rooms and time is ticking on. And I don't know about anybody else, but it's really, really hot still, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
And I've got to admit, I'm thinking of a beer, which is fine at this time of night. So I'm going to switch on to Pam now. Pam, you go ahead and move the slides.
Okay, so shared resources this week, a bit thin on the ground, I must say, because I think it's because a lot of people are back in school and, they're not they haven't got the time they had before maybe and still trying to get into the swing of it, whatever they're doing with schools, obviously it's still full on. So in terms of this week itself, there's nothing specific, but we have added some more that we've had in the previous weeks onto the webpage. And as you know, you're going to get this PowerPoint afterwards, so you can click on the link there, which will take you to our specific English GCSE webinar resource page, and on there are the recordings from the previous weeks, and then you'll also get the PowerPoints on there, and the resources on as well, so it's all there for you.
Two things. One, there were unfortunately quite a few people who couldn't get on today. Obviously there's been some problem behind the scenes. I don't know what that is. But if you had a colleague who couldn't get on, don't forget that they'll still get the link. If they registered, they'll get the link. But also what I wanted to say is if you've joined us for the first time today, all the webinars should be there, and they're worth looking at. There's loads of free resources, okay? There's pretty much everything I've ever made on there. So it's worth going back. We've got one with Kat Howard on, for instance, and they're separated into language and literature. So by all means, if you haven't been with us before, go back and use them for CPD. Sorry, Pam.
Definitely. No, that's a really good point. Definitely. So moving on, we're going to do the weekly draw. As you know, we have 2 draws. So this week's draw for the survey. So at the end of this session, you'll see there'll be a feedback, a QR code at the end, and you click on that and you do the feedback. Please give us the feedback if you can, because obviously we need the feedback to reflect and see, what you liked about it, what you want in future, that sort of thing, because this is the 11th week now, and I know Julie as you know, from the feedback we've been able to, she's been able to tailor them to what you need. The point being, please do the feedback survey. We really need you to do that. The £10 voucher winner for this week is, let's have a look. I've got my little cup here, and the £10 voucher goes to Nick. Is Nick here? He comes, I think. Let's have a look. Well, if you're there, Nick, type it in. Goes to Nick. There he is, 528490, otherwise known as Nick.
Brilliant. Well done, Nick.
Yeah, okay. And then we're going to go with the £25 voucher, because this is the fortnightly draw. And the £25 voucher this week goes to Rosa Severino. And it's really a shame, because I can see, looking at the list of people, Rosa's not here today. She usually is here every week.
Every single one. What a shame. Rosa shared some
Yeah,
things. That's
I know.
a shame, yeah. But she'll still get her voucher.
So Rose, yeah, definitely. So we'll send that out to you. And Nick's saying, can I donate to Pam and Julie for a drink once pubs are open? Oh dear.
Actually, yes, the big exciting thing. Obviously, I would usually share this privately tomorrow, but I don't know if anybody else managed it. But I managed yesterday to get a hairdresser's appointment and reserve a table at my local pub for the 4th of July. So it's going to be my Independence Day.
That's going to be packed, yeah, definitely. Okay, so yeah, so I'll send the £25 voucher out and the £10 draw. And the further dates, let me just say about the further dates for you. So next week we've got literature. The week after that, if you haven't already signed up, sign up for the Benjamin Zephaniah special guest. That week is we had planned, you see, to do a conference on diversity in literature, since we put our new text on last year, you know, reflecting a more diverse text literature. But unfortunately, because of the situation, it's been cancelled, and we've organised it months ago, but now we're going online. And the good news is Benjamin Zephaniah is going to be a guest on that particular session. So that's 9th of July, and it's going to be on for 2 hours instead of 1 hour. And please go to the website where you know the training Pearson one, where you log on, where you register for this. And at the moment, it says that it's full. We're trying to get a bigger room, so to speak. So go on the waiting list, because as soon as we get the bigger room, which holds up to 1,000 people, we will then let you know, and you'll get the link for it. So that's that. And then on 16th of July, we're doing language again, looking ahead to 2021. Julie, do you want to take over here? Because I think this is more for you to say.
That's really the last one. I mean, this has kind of grown, actually. We started off just doing one as a network event, and it's kind of snowballed and become weekly. And it's been great. I've really, really enjoyed it, actually. It's challenged me to find new things and to keep looking. I'm a bit of a Twitter addict now, which is maybe unfortunate, but hopefully people have enjoyed it. And if you haven't been with us before, people are saying that this is the first one and they really, really enjoyed it. You've still obviously literature next week, and I do share loads of resources. So I'm going to do a best of next week, and then obviously we've got the diversity, and I'm going to be talking you through all the text that we've got after Benjamin. I go after Benjamin Zephaniah, which is a little bit intimidating, but I'll do my best. And then obviously the last language one.
It's just a shame. Sorry, Sharon, I was going to say, it's a shame it's not the live concert, and then we could have all met him, but hey-ho, that's life this year.
I know. And then after that, as well as that, on the 14th of July, I'm going to do one for NQTs, and I want that to be any subject. I'm not going to make it subject specific. And it really is based on, I'm going to share loads of little starter activities and interactive things that I've gathered over the sort of 15 years of teaching sort of CD borderline, but it really is about engagement in the classroom and about giving NQTs confidence. So that's one to put in your, or to pass on to people, please, if you know an NQT, because I feel that they're going to be quite nervous, I think, in September, and it'd be nice for them to have something under their belt. Then 15th of July, heads of department. I'm working with a head of department that we deal with at a school called Chase Terrace, Becky Cowley, and she's going to be sharing that slot with me and talking about things like well-being. She's going to talk you through deep dive Ofsted, because she's had one, so she knows the questions. And we're also going to be talking about how to reduce marking loads. We've got all sorts of ideas. So that's 15th of July. So do please, if you're a head of department or you have a head of department, please do get logged on for that one. Right, somebody says, any chance of continuing these sessions post-lockdown? Karen, we're not stopping because of lockdown. We're stopping because it's the end of term. And I'll talk to Pam tomorrow, but next week I'll give you some news, hopefully, about what we're doing going forward in September, because these have been so successful. And we've built up numbers now, so hopefully I'll be able to bring you some more in September. What more can we do to help? Just a quick whistle-stop tour if you aren't with us usually. Oops, sorry, gone too fast. There's the link to the latest updates, and if you go on those, they're literally updated every day. Okay, every time there is anything, we will share it with you instantly as well. We know no more than you do in terms of plans for the future about exams, but we do share it as soon as we know. But that's the link. Free online lessons, if you haven't had a look at those, they're free. You can even just get the slides. You don't have to listen to the lesson, but they are literally delivered live, so you can tell your students about them, and that's sort of halfway through already. That's a brilliant course. It's by a teacher called Rebecca, who's brilliant. There's the link to our resources, and just a refresher there on the diversity texts, and a mention of what we've got. There's more on our website, but there's already knowledge organisers for all of them. And I'm doing a PowerPoint lessons for Core and Boy and Boys Don't Cry at the moment. And a colleague of mine is doing Refugee Boy and the Empress. So they're going to be fully resourced for you and ready for September. So please have a go. Definitely got some traction on the Empress and Boys Don't Cry, which I have actually come to love and really enjoyed it. And I'm going to talk to you more about that at the diversity conference, because I think it's a really good text for getting in touch with a lot of cultural issues today. Okay, so that's that. There's just a link if you're head of department and you can help us out with research. We'd be interested to know. We're doing research into how you find the teacher assessed grades this year. Claire, as always, she's always at the end of a PowerPoint, which is a shame, but Claire, the lovely Claire's there. She's the first person to help you out, okay, with anything. And then if you want to switch to Edexcel, or indeed you want any more information about the spec, there's a link there. And now I'm going to put the feedback up. I'd really like you to do it. And I didn't put on there my Twitter handle, but we'd be really appreciative if you could share these sessions on Twitter if you enjoyed them. And my Twitter handle is just Julie Hughes 4. Okay, capital J, capital H. It's really unimaginative. I should call myself something more interesting. But I will put that into the group chat. So if people could share, and obviously share and tell Chris how much you enjoyed today, that'd be really useful, okay? And there's a link there to our, that somebody just put in the group chat, to our email address, the full English. Please share your resources, anything you've got as a result of today. And on that note, I'm going to sign off. Hope you all have a lovely weekend, and hope to see you all next week, and then definitely the week after for the diversity conference. So thank you very much, and super millions thanks to Chris. He was absolutely brilliant. Thank you very much.